Welcome to the PainExam podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming back Justin Harvey. Welcome, Justin.
Dr. Rosenblum, it's a pleasure as always.
Yeah, we saw each other, well, briefly at Aspen. We were supposed to
That's right.
podcast there, but I guess we're both too busy
Yeah,
schmoozing and
conferences are always a
hanging out
Zoom,
by
so
yeah, exactly, in the exhibit hall and meeting everyone else there. I mean, it was a great conference, and Aspen's come a long way, hasn't it?
it absolutely. I mean, that was actually my first Aspen conference, and really enjoyed catching up with some clients and friends and making new friends, and lots of great content. It was really a pleasure being there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just exponential growth. Where they were 2, 3 years ago, where they are now. And I have to take my hat off to Tim and Dawood because I think it's amazing what they built. Anyway, speaking of building things, you've been quite busy. So let's get down to it and what you've been up to lately and who your partners are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have recently launched with a couple of partners this thing called the Practice Accelerator, which is a course and a series of webinars and some interactive space where physicians who are interested in owning, specifically launching pain practices, right now is how we have it built. It's a curriculum designed to take them through all of the key considerations that one must consider if you want to launch a practice. Everything from business and marketing and operational considerations and building a professional team and all those types of things to be able to help a physician evaluate. Number one,
Wait,
evaluate is this.
time out,
Yeah.
Justin. Are you a doctor?
So I am not a physician. I am a financial advisor who works with physicians. And one thing that I have sort of bumped into many times over the last handful of years is physicians face a lot of business challenges, and they're frequently not prepared by the medical education system at large to be able to address those challenges in their own practices when they exist. So, as I've been sort of going on this journey myself professionally, trying to help my clients, I've bumped into other like minded professionals like Dr. Jessica Jameson and her practice operations manager, Amy Reynolds, who are my partners. We just said there's got to be there needs to be something where we can help doctors at least evaluate, is this a good fit for me? And then if they say yes, this is a good fit, to give them basically the guardrails to say, like, here's the direction you need to be moving, and here's the things you definitely don't want to do, and here's enough material to get you started as far as a business plan, financial pro forma, and lots of other checklists and things that you need to, important questions to ask, so that you can then get the ball rolling for yourself if you decide it's a good fit.
Right. And Justin's been on the show before. If you haven't caught that episode, he's a financial advisor, financial planner, and he's right. I mean, these mistakes could cost you thousands of dollars.
Tens
So
at least, yeah.
yeah, so it's definitely you're creating something that there is a need for. Um, and what do you think the challenges are for physicians who want to be practice owners in general?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. I would say a couple of the big ones. Being a physician business owner or practice owner in this case it requires a mindset shift. When you go through training, you go through med school and residency, you're taught to basically do as you're told,
Right.
and there is some leeway there, but something like taking initiative, promoting yourself, trying to build your own brand and equity in that brand so that it's broadly recognized and respected, which is what you're doing when you're building a practice, and communicating with other physicians and with the public in a way that is, we'll call it self-promoting. That can feel kind of icky
Right.
to physicians. And this is something that for business people comes very naturally, unfortunately, in some cases, where the idea of self-promotion is sort of a necessary prerequisite to business success. And so the mindset shift that says, if I'm going to survive, if I'm going to make it, not only are there all the healthcare market forces that are going to be a headwind, but there's this internal mindset shift that has to happen to say, I am in practice growth mode and I need to make connections and present myself to others as a really amazing solution for their patients, and present opportunity for a mutually beneficial relationship if we're talking about referral relationships with other physicians, and to be essentially a salesperson at the beginning, because
Sure.
you open your doors on day one, you have no patients, no one's gonna knock on your door and say, like, Dr. Smith, come, I want to talk to you immediately. that comes over time, and it comes as a result of a lot of effort and a carefully crafted strategy. So knowing that you need to basically make it happen is an important, I call it mental threshold that you need to cross and to
Right.
understand at the outset.
Right. You have to hustle. Nobody's giving you anything. This is not anesthesia where you're handed a patient.
Exactly right.
And it's getting more and more competitive. And these practices are
Yes.
hiring their own PM&R or pain docs to do their injections. Orthopedics are doing it. Neurosurgeons are doing it. And then there have the non-pain trained people who are encroaching on the procedures that we do, just like the neurosurgeons think we are encroaching on the procedures they do. So yeah, it's, I wouldn't say it's a free for all, but there's definitely a lot going on, and maybe where there was black and white, there's a lot more gray around the borders of, or the fringes of, our scope of practice.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
funny as technology and training advance that there is these areas of overlap, and it
That's
does
right. And
get
it's not just with
interestingly
pain and
confusing.
neurosurgery. You see it with
Yep, that's right.
cardiology and cardiothoracic surgery and IR, interventional radiology, of course. So, I mean, why are
Yeah.
you so passionate about physician practice ownership?
So fundamentally, what I'm passionate about is physician autonomy and putting the decision-making power for one's own life into one's own hands.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that practice ownership does two things at once. It creates an opportunity to build equity for oneself, the value of a business that you own, that is successful and profitable, and you own it, and it's an asset for you. So that as you think about what assets do I have maybe a house, maybe a 401k, and then I got a business or other, you know, uh, the value that's sort of tied up in that, and that can be a really powerful thing over time, and it can shorten a physician's journey to financial independence when they own that asset rather than giving away the equity of their hard work. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everyone should start a practice because it's very difficult. It's very competitive. There's a lot of challenges along the way. But for people for whom it is the right thing, it can be a really important component to contributing towards physician autonomy. And I don't have to tell you, I mean, David, you know better than I do. It is under attack from all angles. And my wife's an anesthesiologist out here in Portland. And I see in the specialty of anesthesiology as well, which has its own flavor of the attack on autonomy, that the more financially you can insulate yourself, then you have the power to say no. You have the power to live life on your own terms and to practice on your own terms.
Sure.
And if you are the one who's calling the shots, then you're going to be less stressed and, well, don't get me
Hopefully
wrong, it's
happier.
stressful too, but hopefully happier. You'll experience more fulfillment.
Right. Yeah. What do you think are the traits that a doctor who succeeds as at practice ownership will exemplifies?
Good question. A couple that come to mind. The first is taking a responsibility for the entire outcome of the practice launch and operations. So you're going to need a team. You're going to need a lot of people to help you do what you do because it's complex. The environment is constantly shifting. You know, again, like compliance and regulatory burden is constantly increasing. And so you can't do all that yourself, but you do need to take ownership to make sure that all of the things that need to get done do get done,
Right.
either by you or someone else.
Sure.
So that sense of ownership and responsibility and the perseverance is really important. I mean, there's a book. There's a like a sociologist, or maybe she's a psychologist. Her name is Angela Duckworth out of Philadelphia, I believe, who wrote this book called Grit, which is she's building on
Heard
the
of it.
work of many others who have gone before her. I actually bought a book. Carol Dweck is her name. It's called. I had it on my desk. I forget. I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes.
Sure.
But it's about the importance of mindset and the importance of the story that you're telling yourself about yourself and your own journey, and how that is going to shape your personality, your decisions, your future. Really, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's going to shape your future. And so people who are going to succeed in a very competitive industry like medicine, and in a very competitive specialty like pain management, they're going to think that they can do it. They're going to take ownership over that, and they're going to build a professional team that's going to help them with the things that are not technical proficiencies of theirs, so that they're not wasting time trying to do stuff that they don't know anything about and burning valuable hours. You know, you said, David, you can waste time, or you can waste thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, which is true, but you can actually waste hours and hours and hours of your valuable
God.
time, which is even more important. And one of the strategies that I actually encourage people who are considering this to consider using is using locums on the front end, where you're trading your valuable time for a high wage, and then launching your practice. And envision a seesaw here. You're doing all locums, and your practice is running on Mondays, and then you're scaling off the locums, and as you build patient volume, now you're doing Mondays and Tuesdays, and then maybe you're throwing in a Wednesday twice a
Sure.
month. And then as time passes, you scale
Right.
out the locums, and then you're up and running, and in so doing you can minimize the financial risk. So understanding that your time is valuable and you want to be using it for the highest and best purpose is critical. And the
And
last
that's
thing that
what,
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and that's what a lot of my colleagues have done. And that's what, if I ever left my current position, I would consider if I was going to start my own practice to, luckily the job market for anesthesia is quite good at this point in time. So you can do locums or, that 3, 4 day a week job and build a practice on the side. So
Yes.
it's doable. It's tough, but it's doable.
That's tough but doable is a perfect descriptor. And that's the last point that I would say is financial preparedness is really important. Because if you don't have a plan and if it's not grounded in reality, it doesn't matter. I'm a raging optimist, is how I like to describe myself. You
Right.
probably perceive that. But if it's not grounded in reality, then all the optimism in the world is not going to deliver you a viable business. So
Right, you got that right.
understanding how much financial runway do I have? How am I controlling risk in my own personal life? Do I have my spouse on board if I'm married? What is our plan to get from here to there?
Sure.
That is really important as well.
That's right. Getting your
That's
spouse on
obviously,
board is one of the most important
oh
parts.
my gosh, the most important, I would
Right.
say. Yeah.
Excellent. So, and speaking of spouse, yours just finished residency, correct?
That's right. So my wife, hi Sarah, I'm sure you won't listen to this podcast, but she finished training at University of Pennsylvania. We just moved out here to Portland, Oregon. It's funny because, David, I have my own podcast, which she doesn't listen to that either. So I like to make this joke periodically, but really proud of her. And I would say I have a new just understanding and appreciation for, obviously I work with clients who have gone through this and gone through transitions, gone through moves, gone through career change. And I've always intellectually understood what that means. But now I,
You're going through
I
it.
get it. I get it to a different level. And we're about to send our little one to daycare. Today is his third day.
Oh, nice.
And just having that happen with the move, with the new job, and having to make all these decisions about your lifestyle and your career, it's overwhelming, but it's really beautiful, and it's also something to be celebrated. So I'm so proud of her, and it's been an awesome ride.
So, well, first of all, congratulations. I mean,
Thank you, thank you.
that's a big deal.
Yeah,
And you mentioned the move and all that. So, does the city that you live in play a factor in launching a practice or how you launched a practice?
great question. So another thing that separates people who fail from people that don't is doing due diligence to understand competition, to understand, can I get on the payer panels?
Right.
Is there a pain doctor on every corner? Like
Right.
these things are really important to know. So the geography is very relevant. How saturated is the market? And there are feasibility studies that you can. There are people whose job it is to say there's this many patients or potential patients in this age, and here's the prevalent conditions, and here's how many doctors per square mile and per capita, and these are some of the numbers that it's helpful to know to understand the competition, and because you're going to have to deal with that competition. And if it's a small town and there's one doctor and plenty of need, then you moving in may be an easy thing. If it's a big city and there's somebody on every corner, that is something you're going to have to deal with. And your business plan and your marketing plan, and the availability of a referral network. If there's a one big show in town and they have every single doctor who refers patients to them, it's going to be very difficult for you to make contacts with other physicians who are going to be willing to share patients with you potentially. You want to know that in advance rather than opening your doors and then you start going to meet with all the family practice docs and orthopedists and chiropractors, and you find, oh man, they're all already sending their patients to XYZ practice down the street, and you're kind of stuck.
Right.
So
There's nothing worse than going to your neighborhood orthopedic practice only to find out that they already have hired a pain doctor who's
Oh my
working for
gosh.
them,
Yes.
because you're pretty much guaranteed no referrals. So
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
and I've definitely seen that
Yeah.
when I've done my marketing, and it's yeah, so be prepared. Any other stories or advice about how to help you prepare for going out on your own?
Yeah. So I mentioned financial preparedness. Let me give a little color here because I think it's helpful. If we take two ends of the spectrum, one end of the spectrum is like, um, I'm married, I have kids, my spouse stays at home, I have a bunch of debt, potentially credit card debt, I have very high fixed expenses, and I need to continue to make, you know, $15,000 to $20,000 a month just to cover my lifestyle at baseline. If that we'll say is like the extreme end of lack of flexibility, on the other end of the spectrum would be I'm married to a high earning spouse. I have no kids. I have no mortgage. I have low fixed expenses. I have no debt and I have a lot of cash. And then there's a spectrum here.
Yeah, right.
You need to place yourself in that spectrum and say, where do I fall and how financially prepared am I? How much financial runway do I have? How many months of my living expenses do I have in the bank? And you don't need to fund a year's worth of living expenses from your own checking account, although that's not a bad idea.
Hmm.
But you need to have a plan to get there. And so understanding how you're going to close the gap, whether it's with an SBA loan or with locums work or with taking on another partner who's going to make a big capital contribution to help sort of launch the practice.
Right.
Also, knowing that you're going to have business expenses, significant business expenses in year one. Um, Putting those pieces in place and understanding how are you going to pay your own mortgage, that's going to be really, really important. And I talked about autonomy because it's empowering and it gives the sense of satisfaction. You're not going to be super satisfied if you're stressed out of your mind about making your mortgage payment.
All
So
right.
this type of preparedness is really, really critical.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple other things, making sure you're well insured, making sure that you have a professional team lined up, an accountant and a CPA, or sorry, an accountant and a bookkeeper to help you with the numbers of your practice and to look over your financial projections to make sure that they're reasonable. And then as you're moving into practice ownership, to make sure that you have checks and balances built in so that, uh, unfortunately, it feels like every couple of weeks or month or so, I see another headline. It's like, Dr. Smith was robbed blind by their bookkeeper who slowly siphoned $687,000 out of the practice checking account and wrote checks to themselves. And whatever happened in that circumstance, there was not enough oversight, not enough checks and balances to be able to tell when that's going to happen. So having a few different people, yourself and your bookkeeper and your accountant and maybe your financial advisor and maybe somebody else who are all vested in your success and can look at the numbers on a monthly or quarterly basis with you and give you feedback will probably help you to
Sure.
observe something like that happening. So protecting yourself from the really bad things. As I mentioned insurance, disability and life insurance are really important. Obviously, David, I've had a couple of really heartbreaking cases recently where I've seen people who have not insured appropriately and through either death or disability have left their family in a very difficult position.
Oh, that's
And
awful.
so this is another time, another inflection point where you can reevaluate how is my current personal risk management strategy looking. And if here's one thing to think about. If you launch a practice, um, you're making no money at the beginning. So getting a disability insurance policy for a self-employed person is very difficult. And if you have no income, they're going to give you maybe $5,000 to $7,000 a month, which is way better than nothing, but way not enough for the average physician household.
Right.
And so if you get that policy beforehand, while you're still making an income and can prove it, then when you make a transition in employment, you can generally bring it. Obviously depends, but you can bring that policy with you to protect you because imagine you're 3 months into launching a practice, you're finally starting to get some traction, and then you have some illness or some
Uh-huh.
injury and you can't treat patients.
Yep.
How devastating that would be. So to be able to have an income protection mechanism at that time is going to contribute to your sanity as well as your
Yeah.
family's financial well-being. So those types of things are really important and do distinguish those who succeed from those that don't, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're preaching to the choir because I advocate that to my residents, and I think you're right on with that, and that's what you do for a living. So of course you're right on with that.
Yeah.
So back to launching one's own practice. Tell me about this practice accelerator.
So it's a 1 month course designed to very quickly help someone assess, is practice launching right for me? And if yes, I need the tools to get me started. So there's a business plan template that we've put a lot of time into that we've customized to be able to help specifically with a medical practice launch and assessing all the important areas of um, business consideration around a medical practice specifically. There's also a financial pro forma template where we give you um, an opportunity to project out your profit and loss a handful of years and looking at all the different expense line items and the sources of funding and basically helping you to ask the right questions so that you can then go through and complete the business plan, go through and complete the pro forma and understand like, am I energized by this? Does this feel like I'm about to unleash my dream? Or does it feel like I'm so stressed I can barely breathe? Um, and in so doing, you can then decide, okay, I want to the point is, but by the end of this 1 month, you've done a business plan, you've created your pro forma, you've had a handful of office hours with Dr. Jameson, who is an experienced practice owner who launched her own practice, and her practice operations expert, Amy Reynolds, who has been running the nuts and bolts of Axis Spine out there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is where Dr. Jameson is. And you've been able to vet your ideas and look at your pro forma and your business plan and talk about the other things that you're worried about, that you're excited about, and have a forum for those live conversations between you and your other peers in this cohort. And then you get to the end of the course and the ball is in your court. So it's not designed to be an ongoing consulting engagement in what I'm describing. It's designed to give you everything you need to decide if you want to take the next step.
Is there an option for ongoing coaching over? Will there be an option over time?
So we do have a number of resources. I know that Dr. Jameson is working on what does it look like for her to have a coaching practice beyond for people who say, yes, I want to do this and I want to work with somebody who's done it ongoing. And so I would say more to follow on that.
Great. So Justin, if someone wants to sign up, where can they find the link? What's the link or website, or how does it work?
So it's Praccel, Praccel.com. And you can find information about the course, an opportunity to sign up there right on the webpage. There's also an opportunity to download a little bit of information that gives you some color about some of the important questions to ask for practice launchers.
Right. There'll also be a link on the show notes as well as painexam.com. So you could find it there. Other announcements, in October on a Wednesday, I'm doing a ultrasound course in New York. If you happen to be local, please stop by. It's a 2-hour course, plus you get 4 hours of online training, total of 6 CME credits, as well as later on in the year, I plan to do a course in Tampa. So just make sure you're on the PainExam list so you'll get the emails and you'll be updated. Justin, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure. Is there any closing remarks or anything you just want to add before you go?
Just thank you for the work that you're doing, David. It's been a pleasure getting to interact with you the last couple of years and using the platform that you've built to continually educate and equip physicians in ways that, in my observation, they're really hungry for and really appreciate. I appreciate very much what you're doing, and it's been a pleasure joining you today.
Thanks, Justin. Have a great day.